Welcome to today's episode of the PivotCast. I am your host, Sarah the Pivoter, and here on the PivotCast, I interview super rad humans from around the world doing epic things in all walks of life. This is a platform to share their voice and their story and bring more value to you. In this live interview, we're going to hear some super rad ideas from Danielle Anderson. She and I connected in Facebook land, and she's going to share her pivot from corporate America into the wellness space. And what we're going to be doing today is talking about some simple and practical tools and strategies that we can start doing today without any overwhelm that will help us move into a place of thriving rather than striving. So without further ado, I would like to bring Danielle on. Make sure that wherever you're tuning in, you put your notes in the comments for us. We will be answering questions live. And if you catch the replay, put in #replay and let us know what you'd like to know, and we'll come back and answer after. This interview will be posted on all platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So pick your poison and we'll catch you there. All right. Danielle, welcome to the PivotCast. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So Danielle, can you tell us a little bit more about your story? What was it that you were doing for so long in corporate America, and what was the catalyst that prompted the pivot into this new space that you're in?
Yes, I worked as an IT consultant for Accenture, and I was a business traveler. So I was getting up on Monday mornings, catching my flight, at the client site, flying home until on Thursday evening. So I did that for many, many years. And actually, the catalyst to begin my transition or my pivot was pregnancy. So I got pregnant with my first son. And at the time, there were no in-town projects I was looking for. And I didn't really at the time want to travel with my child. So I decided to just transition away from corporate America and become a full-time stay-at-home mom. Now, I never saw that I never really pictured, I didn't dream of becoming that, but I operated as that for about 12 years, where I just kind of transitioned. I called myself the chief operating officer of our home. And,
I love it.
and then kept having babies. So I had 4 babies in 6 years, 4 beautiful boys. And it was in that process of being home with them, I had to learn more about, man, how do I care well for myself while trying to care well for these little people? And so through mommying and being a homeschool mom, and actually also what I call being a student in the school of grief, I began to learn a lot more about the importance of what I call whole health, taking care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so I just slowly started to kind of take these baby steps into the wellness space. I got certified to be a yoga and fitness instructor. And then I got lots more certifications, Pilates and TRX. But I also got certified to be a full spectrum doula, because as I was going and learning more about whole health, I wanted to be able to encourage moms to care well for themselves during pregnancy and postpartum, and really just beyond. So I love in your intro how you shared that we're hoping to thrive rather than strive. And that's what I do in this wellness space and all of my offerings. That is my hope. My hope is to offer practical encouragements to people so that they might really experience the fullness of life that's available to us, become agents of healing in their circles of influence. And yeah, just like you said, I want them to thrive rather than strive and just merely survive.
Yes, I love that. And I love the agents of healing in their circles of influence, because I think a lot of people forget that there are people around them. It might be little humans that you're raising or that are in your family that see you often. It might be people at work. And even if you're not a leader in this respect of being a manager at work, you are leading others, you are inspiring them. And so how can you inspire them to also go on this journey and just love life, right? Instead of plodding along and being miserable and feeling that stuck energy.
That's right.
So for those of our watchers and listeners that are with us or that may watch this later that don't necessarily know what a doula is, could you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, a doula is someone who comes alongside a birthing person, maybe before, during pregnancy, during labor and birth, and post. And so as a full spectrum doula, I can serve really in all those different areas. And so we're not medically trained, but we do have my training involves psychological first aid, because I am both a birth and bereavement doula as I do have miscarriage in my story and would want to be able to support other birthing persons that experience that same type of loss.
Yeah.
But that's what we do. We are there to support you emotionally and physically and spiritually, and kind of just help you give you resources and remind you that you're powerful, you're strong, you've got this.
I love that. And I think that's really important because if you think about it, especially in the US and, in many places around the world, what happens? You go and you have a baby and now you've got this tiny little human that you're responsible for, and you don't really know what to do with it. And sure, maybe you learn, okay, how to feed and how to nurse and these types of things, but that psychological safety, not only for this little human, but for yourself, so that you can be the best parent, whether you're the mother or the father, is so critical. And yet we somehow expect that, well, you'll just know how to do it, right? Um,
Yes.
in Asia, for example, in China and Hong Kong, there is I forget the term for it, but basically someone that will come to your home for 30 days and
Right.
really help you, not only in the healing and recovery process using traditional Chinese medicine and soups and herbal brews to help your body recover, because you've literally just gone through a stressful event, giving birth to another human being, but also to teach you how to parent and how to navigate those first 30 days when your life has just changed so radically.
Yes. Yes. I have so many things I could say about that, but we
Yes,
live in
please.
this culture that's so very individualistic,
Mhm.
and we forget that there's so much power in the community. So, yes, as a new parent, you don't know what to do. Like, maybe you had children before, but we're not meant to do all of this stuff alone. And our culture
Yeah.
has created this narrative, and we've bought into it, where we believe we're supposed to be all things to this child, be able to do all the things. And it's just not true. It's not how we were created to function. And so I love when people are intentional in that, especially in that postpartum season where you are intentional about healing and resting and learning how to care for yourself and for this new little baby you have just welcomed. But it really is a communal effort. So I have lots to say about that.
Absolutely. And there's that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, and it's so true. And when we look at, very like Western societies typically tend to be more individualistic, as
Mm.
you mentioned. And so not only in parenting, but in the workplace, it's you've got to do it all. You've got to climb that corporate ladder. You've got to be great at sport, have the six pack abs, have this lifestyle that is super envious. And if you're not doing all these things, you're behind. And
Mhm.
so we've created this culture of needing to get the gold star, the validation, the approval of others in order to feel good about what we're doing, rather than focusing on what actually makes us come alive as humans, which means we're in our zone of genius, as you said, and we're actually contributing to society in an impactful way, instead of trying to force people who should be chefs or artists or musicians into accounting or law or medicine, where they will not be their best performance, where they will not be motivated, and they will procrastinate and then beat themselves up, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And then we also think that we have to do it all, right? So we get so stressed out and we have the shame and blame and guilt. Is that something that you experienced in your corporate career as well? Because you were 15 years in that corporate space, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was about 6 or 7 years in the corporate space, and
Oh,
then
okay.
transitioned about 12 years in the stay-at-home mom homeschooling
And
world.
the chief operating officer of
Yes,
the
the chief
home.
opera I mean, I experienced that in both places. I mean, in corporate America, but also in just being a stay-at-home mom, because
Okay.
you're looking on Instagram and there's always like this standard that
Yeah,
you're supposed to meet. And then you do
right.
feel the shame and the guilt, like, well, I'm not baking cookies with my kids. Or in the corporate space, like, well, I can't do emails at 10 o'clock at night. Like, I'm tired by the, there's always this comparison game going. And
Of
there's a
course.
beautiful quote I love that says that comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
And I feel like we are constantly playing that comparison game. And it takes a lot of, I think, courage to actually stop and pause and go, wait, is that actually who I want to be? Or is that for someone
Mm,
else? Bless them. But am I asked to do and to be something different? And so I do
yes.
think we're invited, and we should be invited into this place of self-awareness, self-reflection, where you can actually kind of stop and inquire of yourself and go, am I burnt out? Is this bringing me joy? Is this actually working well for my life? Is this actually where I want to spend my efforts? Because I
Yeah.
was just listening to another podcast and they were talking about so much of what makes us happy and what brings us joy is to put our effort and energy in those things that really are priority. But oftentimes in our culture, it's the lower priority things that get the most of our attention.
Oh, yeah. The busy
And we
work.
end up not happy or not, not joyous. And so it takes, you have to stop and kind of decide and be courageous and make that shift, make that pivot, like your name.
Yeah. And I love that because I love that you said who we want to be, not what we want to do.
That's right.
And I think that, I mean, it's not just corporate America, it's around the world. It's this focus on the outcome, the result. And so we're constantly chasing this elusive thing, and that goalpost keeps moving, and we change our goals, and then we never feel fulfilled because we can't enjoy in the moment
Mhm.
rather than operating from the space of who we want to be and how we want to show up.
That's right.
And then from there, making the right decisions for us, not for your spouse or your parents or what society tells you that you should want, but actually, do you want those things? Like, do you
Mhm.
want to be a CEO?
Right.
Maybe not,
Right.
right? But
And that's
it
okay.
sounds sexy. Yeah, and it's okay if you don't want to be a CEO. I mean, it's hard work and there's a lot of stuff that you've got to deal with that maybe is not something you actually considered when you thought about that fancy title.
That's right. That's right.
So
Completely
what
agree.
would you say would be something, what are some of the practices that you help people in or invite them to look at so that they can understand how to better pursue what actually brings them joy and
Mhm.
what fulfills them rather than chasing something for the status or the ego?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. The first is I encourage people to embrace what I call the power of the pause and just give
Mm.
yourself those moments to stop. To stop. I mean, we can just be on the treadmill, just going, 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 and we kind of live life, going through the motions, programmed living. So it's
Yes.
good to kind
Okay.
of just pause and check in with yourself and go, is this working? Is this actually how I want to be spending my time? In the pause, you can ask yourself a lot of beautiful questions. And you can really do a beautiful thing for your nervous system too by pausing and slowing down. So
Yeah.
in that idea of who you want to be, pause maybe in the morning or in the evening and ask yourself, decide who do I want to be, and then decide on small practices that you can begin to take to help you move in that direction, to help you head in that trajectory that actually leads you to the person you want to be. I'm really passionate about nervous system work and
Mm.
self-knowing and self-awareness to help us to grow. And so in addition, to me, power of the pause is like an underlying practice for all that I talk about, because it's
Yeah.
going to take us to stop and to have that margin to really reflect. A huge one that really helps us to check in with ourselves, with our mind, with our body, is the breath. To
Mm.
intentionally use the power of the breath to clear your mind, to calm your nervous system. I always ask people like, "Do you do nervous system work?" And people are like, "What does that mean?" In short, that's just so much. But in using your breath, you can actually help yourself to feel safe. You can
Mhm.
help yourself to take that pause, breathe deeply, which can be the difference between you responding rather than reacting. So the
Mm.
breath to me is a powerful tool that's really, really simple and accessible for us.
Yes.
Deep belly diaphragmatic breathing to help us check in with our mind and our body. Those are two that I start with. I have many
Mm.
others.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the foundation. And, this is why I knew we were so aligned and why I wanted to get you on here for the interview because you're literally speaking my language. It's just like everything in my brain's like, yes, yes, yes. That awareness, that's the first step to change
Mhm.
because we don't know what we don't know.
That's right.
Right. And if we don't even understand how we're feeling, then how can we change it? If
That's
we
right.
don't understand what fulfills us, what
That's right.
success means to us,
That's right.
how do we even know when it's there?
That's
Right.
right. There's a beautiful quote from Dr. Gail Parker in a book called Restorative Yoga for Ethnic and Race-Based Trauma. And
Mhm.
she says, in order to change something, you have to first know that it's there, just like you said.
Yes,
And so
right?
if I want to rest more, I have to first stop and go, well, what does my rest currently look like?
Right.
Have to be able to stop and pause and grow in that awareness. And you're doing a beautiful thing for your nervous system, for that medial prefrontal cortex, when
Yes.
you intentionally practice awareness. That
Mm,
actually feeds right into another practice that I give to help people thrive is self-compassion.
mm, yeah.
Self-compassion is made up of three primary ingredients. The first being mindfulness, us being able to pay attention on purpose to what's happening in the present moment without judgment.
Mm,
Mindfulness, awareness. And we can build that muscle through being mindful on a walk, literally stopping and smelling the roses, practicing being present. But self-compassion, the ingredients are mindfulness, self-kindness, and
mhm.
common humanity. And so I
Love
always
that.
like to say that in self-compassion, it's not just the absence of self-criticism, but it's
Mm,
the presence of kindness. And
yeah.
I always like to tie my practices into the nervous system. And here's the real short thing, the short thing about self-compassion. Self-criticism is harmful and confusing to your nervous system.
Mm,
Because in the same moment, you are both the threat and the threatened, and your nervous system is
mm.
confused.
Right. It just goes haywire.
Yeah. So self-compassion is helpful. Like your nervous system can deal with that. That's like a gift to your nervous system.
Yes.
So you can intentionally, a very accessible practice, self-compassion.
I love that because usually high performers, people who are climbing that corporate ladder, parents, new parents, parents who've already had children for a while, we all judge ourselves, right? We're our worst critic.
Yes.
And it's about, thinking of yourself as you would your 5-year-old. Would you
Yes.
go and criticize that 5-year-old and say, "Oh my God, you didn't, wash your face today. You are a bad little human being."
Right.
No, right?
No.
You would just teach them about why they would want to. You'd lead with that desire point. And what you said before too is having that desire. Like if you really wanted something, you would already have it. Because
Mm,
think about anything in your life that you really, really wanted. And you did whatever it took. You put in all the effort. You were willing to go through the tough, uncomfortable feelings of that growth to get there.
mhm,
And you made it happen, right? There are so many things in our lives that we can then start to look at and appreciate.
mhm.
When we say we want something and we don't do it, we have to look at, do we really want it? Or
Right.
was that something that was the external validation
That's right.
desire? Or was that planted there by somebody else?
That's right.
Because what you said about priority is a very powerful language shift. So I want everyone listening to think about something they don't have in their life right now, but that they say they want.
Mm,
And then use the phrase, I don't have X, whatever that is. I say, I don't have conversational Spanish because I did not make it a priority.
mm,
If that makes you uncomfortable and squirm in your seat,
mhm.
then that's an indicator, that's your barometer of change your action so that you can make that a reality. You can now focus your attention there. If, however, you're like, whatever,
Yeah.
no, doesn't bother me,
Not
put
about
it
me.
on the shelf, get rid of
Yes.
it, find some other thing that you would like to have in your life as your goal and choose to be the person that shows up for that rather than trying to get it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you can intentionally pursue that through those moment by moment daily choices that you make to head towards that, further down that trajectory. I like to think about the visual of a plant, like you're cultivating something.
Yeah.
So you plant that seed and you water it and you tend it over and over. And over time, it blooms, it flourishes. And so I think that's the same way in life. We have to think about intentionally, well, what do I want to cultivate? What do I
Right.
want to achieve? What do I want to grow? And now I need to actually, like you said, put the effort in to go and get it.
And getting that clarity comes from the awareness of what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. And I love that you use the plant analogy. I'm a plant mom, so it's totally my thing. But I call it your success garden,
Mhm,
right? It
mhm.
doesn't have to be one thing. When you have a garden, you don't just have one plant in there usually. You have a myriad of different things and they bloom at different times of the year and they require different amounts of attention and care and effort.
Mhm.
Sometimes they attract different bugs and weeds. So there are all these different things to look at. And what do most people do? They buy the seeds and then they're like, why aren't they growing? But the seeds are still in their hand, right? They haven't actually planted them.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. And I love that you've talked about just that awareness, being present and being honest with yourself is so powerful. Just like in your example, I have to be honest with myself to say, do I actually really want this, or did I pick this up from someone else's goal list years ago? and maybe I can now have some courage to put it down, put it on the shelf, set it aside.
Right.
It's not a value to me. That awareness of mind, of narratives, of body can take you so far. So the practical exercise there, I like to call it practicing being conscious,
Mm,
intentionally, or practicing being present, where again, we pause and we stop and we inventory where am I? How am I doing? What do I want? Sometimes it's a checking in with your narratives, because sometimes
mm,
there's default narratives and limiting beliefs at play, toxic thinking that
yes.
we're not even aware of, that's keeping us from being able to get those goals. Or in the garden analogy, there's these like toxic narratives that are popping up as weeds in this garden that we're trying to cultivate. And I need
Yeah.
to do something to intentionally pull up those weeds. But I have to
Yes.
first pause and go, okay, let me pay attention to my mind. Let me pay attention to those knee-jerk narratives, those knee-jerk
Yes.
stories I tell myself. That's powerful work, that mindset work. So being
Absolutely.
conscious with your mind and what you're telling yourself, powerful.
And that weed may look like a flower. It might
Mm.
be beautiful and it might
Mm.
appear, and you're like, ooh, this is a great addition to my garden. And it's not until you realize that underneath those roots are sucking the water from the other plants and now they're dying
That's good.
that you go, oh, wait a second. Actually, this shouldn't be here.
Mhm.
And this is not something that I want to put all my resources and energy into.
That's
And
right.
so sometimes they seem innocent on the surface, but underneath there's things going on. And again, it's just that awareness. And I like to also invite people to consider, how did that thing that is currently limiting you serve you in the past?
Mm.
Because everything has that limit and serve.
That's
And
right.
someone asked me the other day, well, what about when I overate to, stuff my feelings down?
Mhm, mhm.
How did that serve me? And I said, well, at the time, you didn't have the tools
That's
to
right.
process those emotions. Your nervous system was shot. You
Mhm,
would have had a breakdown.
mhm.
So having that food as your escape, as that numbing
Right.
technique, sure, you gained weight and you put all these other things now that you have to process, and that's now limiting you.
Yeah.
But it served you by keeping you a functioning member of society, and you didn't have a breakdown that required, therapy or hospitalization or whatever the case might be. Right. And so
Yes.
always find that limit and serve, and then we can come back to that neutral and choose consciously, as you said, that response
That's
versus
right.
the house is burning down.
That's right. Oh, I love that's so good. It made me think about, I had kind of a self-forgiveness Saturday this past weekend,
Oh, I love it.
and one of the things I wrote down was, forgive yourself for the things you did, or for the things you had to do to survive. Like,
Mm,
there's a level, because I am a type 1 on the Enneagram, and I can carry a lot of bitterness, and so I can carry a lot of shame and frustration for things that I did. So self-forgiveness is a really intentional practice for me.
yes.
But in this idea, I had to like look back on, reflect on the past couple of years and go, okay, in those spaces, just like you said, I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the courage. I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know whatever I didn't know. I can
Right.
forgive myself for the things I did to survive. So in your example, I needed to live. So I needed to make it through those emotions. So maybe I ate all the ice cream. And
Yeah.
it was a maladaptive, it was a maladaptive strategy, but it kept me alive. And so
Yeah.
now I have the awareness and new tools. I can make different choices, but I don't have to live in this present by constantly shaming a previous version of me.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same thing for a lot of these behaviors that we don't necessarily know are there. They were, when you're 5 years old and all your mental faculties are not fully developed and your mom's an hour late picking up from school. For an hour, you thought you were abandoned,
Right.
and your little self was like, how am I going to survive?
Mhm.
Right. And
Mhm.
even though mom came back and, you were safe again, there was that moment that has now planted that seed, which is running the show,
That's
and
right.
you're triggered when people are late,
That's right.
right?
That's
Because
right.
you feel abandoned, but you don't
Yes.
know how to articulate that. So
That's right.
digging into this stuff is so powerful.
So powerful. We like to say, it's so important to look back in order to go forward, because our
Yes.
past is playing out in our present, but we can change how our past plays out in our future by this intentional self-awareness, self-reflection, pausing work.
Yes. And the pause, going back to that, um, when we listen to music, for example, a beautiful, like complex piece of music or any song, there are pauses.
Yes.
And if there were no pauses, it would just be white noise.
Mhm.
And we wouldn't have this emotional pull to it, it wouldn't actually be this beautifully complex thing that we love to listen to,
Mhm.
right? And so that is just as important as the note in order to get that melody, that harmony, or that rhythm. And it's the same thing in our daily lives.
Absolutely. Yes.
I love it. So for people who really struggle with pausing as we wrap up, what would be something that would be very easy for them to start doing so that they can start to give themselves this pause?
Mhm. I would start very small with saying, I'm going to intentionally pause for 30 seconds when I hear the alert on my phone, like the text came
Mm,
through. I
yeah.
don't have to always immediately respond. I'm going to intentionally practice the pause there. So I would say like find something very, very practical and start with, okay, that thing is going to be my reminder, my signal to practice pausing. And maybe it's,
Love it.
in the pause, I'm not going to count seconds. I'm going to just take 2 deep breaths and then I
Mm,
will respond. Or maybe the reminder is your child just came in the room and said they needed something and you practice, you know what? I don't have to always respond to y'all immediately. Y'all can learn that I need rest. Y'all can learn the power of the pause too. So I say, wait, I'm going to, I think
yeah.
just start very small and very practical and slowly over time begin to increase the pause. Maybe the pause then becomes,
Mm,
I'm going to intentionally take 10 minutes of stillness and quiet on my lunch break. And it slowly,
mm,
slowly builds. I have
yeah.
practiced this pause, and our family now practices a whole Sabbath. We have a whole day where we
I love
are
it.
intentionally resting and being still because we want to move away from the go, go, go of our
Yeah.
culture. But it
Yeah.
took practice to get there. We
Yeah.
didn't go from 0 to 24 hours and overnight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love that. It's that small bite-sized pieces, right? And so when we have this big goal or this big change or transformation we're seeking, we bite off more than we can chew and then we're choking.
That's
Rather
right.
than the, like, let me get this small bite, let me get comfortable with it, assess do I need more or not, and then take another bite,
That's
right?
right. It's like the picture of the drip that eventually causes a beautiful pattern in the rock, where
Yeah,
we didn't need the waterfall to hit the rock. We needed a steady drip
yes,
over centuries that created this huge cavern, this huge divot
yes.
in this stone.
Yes, absolutely. It's about taking small bite-sized pieces and leading on to that, I'm about to start my meditative mind snacks mini series for meditation that's going to start in just about a minute. So if you'd like to join me, would love to have you there. But just a reminder for everyone out there that it's about the small consistent actions that you can take, something that's practical, and be kind to yourself in the process. Amazing. So, Danielle, where can people find you on any platform? Where can we direct them so that they can connect with you if they'd like to learn more?
Yes, my website is wellwithdanielle.net.
Okay.
And I'm on Facebook and Instagram. My Instagram is Danielle.l.anderson with an O-N. And then usually you can start there and find me on Facebook because my Facebook,
Yeah.
it's a harder name to find.
Well, I'll comment when the
And you're
video
gonna
posts
yeah,
with all your links so people can find you.
excellent.
Perfect. All right. Well, Danielle, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours and hours about these topics. So I'm sure we'll have you on the PivotCast again very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Same.
Bye.